Hello everyone, this is Scruffy at Scruffy Tales, and this is the War Zone. And in this video we will be taking a look at the battle for Stepove, the small village north of Avdiivka, and what the Russians are doing to take control of it, and what the Ukrainians have to do in order to keep it in possession. Right, let's take a look here. Here we go. Yeah, the plan was to upload this video on the 3rd or the 4th, and it's now going to be on the 5th by the looks of it. And so here we have Stepove, and this is Avdiivka, and there's combat all over the place over the last couple of days. Blue arrows indicate where Ukraine has made some advances on the 4th, on the 3rd, and the red is where we have Russian advances over the last couple of days. So as you can see, there's action going on all along the front line here at Avdiivka. Quite incredible, to be honest. It's been a stalemate for weeks and months, and now all of a sudden all hell has broken loose. But our main focus will be Stepove, and as you can see here on the 29th of November, this is what the front line looked like. And then on the 3rd, Russia has pushed forward along this windbreak and this windbreak into town. The latest updated map also has Russia being able to push into this windbreak here to fully control it. And we are now first off going to be taking a look at the reporting done by liveua.map, and it's a bit of a mystery, and the things that they are telling us. Right, so we're going to be comparing three maps, my three main sources. Here we have the deep state map on the 3rd, the ISW map, and the liveua map on the 3rd. And as you can see, the liveua map shows Russian advances north of Stepove. That is not on the deep state map. And also the southern advances, they are more in line with what deep state is showing. Then we have the ISW map, also showing Russian advances south of Stepove, and this orange field is based on Russian claims, on where Russia claims they have managed to push forward. And we have this lake here marked in the blue circles as reference. So yeah, not sure what's going on, but as you can see, the liveua map has Russia pushing out way ahead of the deep state map here, and also has 2 points of contact listed south of the town of Novobakhmutivka, quite far into what the deep state claims is Ukrainian held territory. Very mysterious. And you know, it gets even more weirder since they claim it's based on reports by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and one of their evening reports from the 3rd of December, where they then claim that there's been clashes with Russians south of Novobakhmutivka, or however you pronounce it. And these are the 2 points of contact that apparently the Ukrainian army has reported on. So that means, if we take a look at the deep state map, that Russia has managed to push all the way, all through here, and engaged Ukrainians here, and even pushed down here and engaged Ukrainians here. Now this windbreak here is 3.3 kilometers long. So, I mean, this is quite a long journey for the Russians in order to reach this far and get past all the Ukrainians standing in the way. I have no idea what's going on, if this is true or not, or what's happening. I know that this claim here on the ISW map, this has been on their map for weeks now, and indicated by these purple arrows here. Seems to make more sense since we're seeing the contested area moving back and forth, that, you know, Russia might be pushing in this way. But this move here, I mean, it makes sense. And I think it's a week or two ago, I made a video where I said that this push here more than likely is trying to get up here into this small village in order to cut this road here. But I mean, have they already managed to get this far? I don't know. Oh, if they have, then Russia is in a really, really good position to achieve this goal of advancing in north of both Stepove and Berdichi. And they will also be able to cut this supply line that is running in from the north from a railroad station located up here at a town called Ocheretune. And yeah, here we have it, Ocheretune. Railroad coming in here. Here's the railroad station, and from Ocheretune you have this road that the Ukrainians are using to bring in supplies and reinforcements to Berdichi that can then be sent to Stepove and further south into Avdiivka. And it makes sense for Russia to try and reach this road in order to cut this vital supply line. But have they already managed it without Deep State acknowledging it? I don't know. I mean, we saw this on the 28th of November. The liveua.map reported that Russia had made a push south of Stepove, and they had also managed to push in north to cut the supply line and engage Ukrainians south of Avdiivka. And now they make the same claim here on the 3rd of December that Russia has pushed in north, cut this supply line, and are now fighting Ukrainians south of Avdiivka. What is going on? I have no idea. It makes sense for Russia to try and achieve this, absolutely. But I don't know if they've already managed to do so. If they have, it's a big deal, and Ukraine is in trouble. I don't know. Hard to judge, but according to liveua.map, the Ukrainian army has reported that Russians are actively fighting Ukrainian troops in this area here. Very concerning if that's true. Moving on to take a look at the contested windbreaks north of Stepove. And we will take a look at this windbreak here, this one. As you can see here, the contested area, this is where Russia is trying to push across. There's a small stream here. I don't know if you can see the gray line, that's a stream that the Russians appear to be using to move towards the Ukrainians, so it provides some cover in a ditch. And as you can see here on the 30th, they managed to push the contested area forward a bit along the stream. On the 1st, nothing has really changed on the map, but then on the 2nd, boom, Russia pushes the contested area all the way up to the windbreak, pushing along the stream, pushing in over the field from the tree lines here, and really taking the fight to the Ukrainians. But then on the 3rd, the contested area moves back again, and I'm guessing, ugh. And I'm back. My headset shut down. Blast from the past. Anyway, this was a usual problem in my earliest videos. Anyway, moving on. Ukraine appears to have made a push from the north here to cut the Russians off from the windbreak. So now the windbreak is back in Ukrainian control. And zooming in a bit, here is the stream I was talking about. It moves from Berdichi up here and in north of Stepove, and the Russians appear to be using it and the ditch to move, to be able to advance across the open fields and put pressure on the Ukrainians in these two tree lanes, these two windbreaks. And it allows them to push in and threaten this windbreak, and it allows them to threaten this windbreak here, so the entire windbreak is a contested area. Sorry. They're not only trying to outflank Stepove to the north, they're also trying to outflank it to the south. And yeah, on the deep state map, we can see that this area here is in Russian control, as well as this part of the town itself. So Russia has made two significant pushes in order to get into the town and to outflank the town. And taking a look at the satellite image here, we get some better images. We can see here that Russia has taken these buildings here, and they're trying to advance along this windbreak here, and this part of the windbreak is in Russian control. And with Ukraine holding this area here, this is the contested area. This is where a lot of fighting is going on, more than likely, because my guess is that Russia wants to continue along the windbreak here. And they definitely want to push north here to link up with their troops coming in from the east. So here, and obviously Ukraine wants to stop them. So Ukraine is sending in troops, Russia is sending in troops from two sides. And this part here is probably the site for a lot of combat, and the Ukrainians are more than likely hard pressed to hold this part of the windbreaks. And obviously, since this section of the town is in Ukrainian control and these buildings here is controlled by the Russians, we will have a point of contact here in this area with deadly close quarters battles going on. And zooming in a bit, or rather, not zooming in, sorry for that, taking a look at what Russia can achieve if they push on through in these windbreaks. Sorry, total confusion. Well, the reason that I'm taking a look at this, these two locations is because of the road, this road here that Ukraine relies on to bring in reinforcements and supplies to Stepove. There's a second road up here that they use for logistics as well. But if Russia pushes in the south and manages to reach these two areas, then they can, with ranged fire, engage any Ukrainian truck or armored vehicle moving along this road and basically be able to cut off this supply line, leaving Ukraine with only this option. And if Russia manages to push in north here, then obviously this option will be severed as well. So this is what Russians are trying in the south. They're trying to move in here in order to reach this position to cut this supply line. And obviously, if they come in here, they cannot only reach the town, they can set up shop here and engage any Ukrainian vehicles trying to move through this area here. Again, cutting and severing the supply line. Right, moving on to the fight in the village itself. And according to Deep State, this is how the village has been split between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Russia has secured this part of the town, a small stretch of road with, oh, I don't know, half a dozen buildings. And Ukraine is firmly in control of this part of town. And in between is the contested area, where most of the fighting is more than likely taking place here. And what can Ukraine do to hold the line and keep the Russians at bay? Well, what they can do is basically, if they have one or two Bradleys, we have seen footage of Bradleys operating in this village. So what they can do is that if they have a Bradley in this area here, positioned with a line of sight along this main street, that would prevent the Russians from crossing the street, because if there's a 25mm chain gun looking down the street, you don't want to try and run across, because that means you're gonna have a very bad day, probably involving your head getting removed by Ukrainian incoming fire. So simply by setting up a Bradley in a good position down here somewhere where you're safe and protected, your chain gun can then deny the Russians the use of this street and ensuring that they can't cross it, at least not without taking a lot of casualties. Same thing goes for if you reposition up here, then you can aim accurate fire down this lane here, covering the open fields, making it damn hard for Russia to get across the fields from the trees and into the buildings. And if you have a Bradley down here, obviously you can rely on the street here and the gardens to aim fire at the contested buildings here. And if you have moved a Bradley, I mean, it could be one Bradley moving back and forth as needed. You don't need 2 or 3 of them. All you need is one. It's more difficult, but one can move around in order to avoid artillery, to avoid the drones, and set up shop and be mobile and open fire on the enemy as needed. And if the Bradley has moved down here, he can then open fire up on the contested area, and he can even fire into the Russian controlled area. So the Russians will probably struggle if Ukraine has a Bradley or any other vehicle in the area. If it's a M113 with a 50 cal, it achieves the same thing. If they have a 50 cal covering the street, Russians won't be crossing it anytime soon, at least not without throwing a lot of smoke grenades to cover them as they cross the streets. Ukraine can achieve a lot with machine guns as well. They don't need Bradleys or heavy vehicles to do any of these things. They just need properly set up machine guns, and they can achieve the exact same thing. Say they have a machine gun in the trees here, it can provide the same covering fire suppression as a Bradley would along the street, for instance. And I've highlighted this building here. It seems like a natural location for a machine gun. since from here he has a lot of open spaces, a lot of fields of fire, where he can engage targets up here in the contested buildings. This building will more than likely also be targeted by enemy mortars because it's my goddamn headset. Anyway, this building is an obvious location for snipers, machine gunners, what have you. So the Russians will probably make sure to aim indirect fire mortars at this location, for the very reason that it is a good spot for a machine gunner to cover all the approaches here. It can shoot down here in case Russians end up here. It can shoot up here if the Russians are up here, and it can cover the wide open spaces here, denying any movement across town here. Same thing up here. If you have machine guns up here, you can obviously fire into the contested areas all over here, and you're basically protected by the open field, so you can't do much about it. You will end up in a firefight with this machine gun. And if you have a rifle, if you have an AK-47, you don't want to end up in a firefight with a machine gun. This location will also obviously be able to fire down this road here to engage Russians in the windbreak. This area here is listed as contested, but I doubt it is. I mean, you might have Russians down here trying to push in towards Ukrainian positions, but this area here feels like it should be well and truly in Ukrainian control. They might be taking a lot of fire, indirect fire, maybe taking shots from the windbreak, taking shots from the buildings up here, but it should be properly in Ukrainian control. And if it is, I'm guessing that it is. If they have a couple of machine gunners here, they can obviously shoot north into the contested areas. They can shoot north into the buildings that Russians are in control of, and they can also fire into the windbreaks as the Russians are trying to advance through them. So this area here, very much important, and probably just like the building over here, a location where Russia is aiming a lot of indirect fire. So as you can see, if the Russians want to move into town, there are a lot of angles that they need to take into consideration, because the Ukrainians will have Bradleys with chain guns, and they will have troops with machine guns ready to open fire at the Russians at any moment from any angle, basically. So what are the Russians up to? Well, how did they get these buildings? I'm guessing that they advanced along the windbreak and then managed to cut across, probably relying on a lot of suppression in order to cross the open ground, and probably took a lot of casualties as well, but managed to get in, get a foothold, and then expanded that foothold over time. And as we can see, they've extended their reach along the windbreak here, and now they are in a position to continue the push along the street in these buildings, and also to continue pushing along the windbreak itself. And what can the Russians do? Well, they really need to try and bring up BMPs or BTRs, something armored with a big gun, because they need to shut down this lane here. And if the Ukrainians have a Bradley down here, then the Russians, they need a BMP-2 that can counter it with its 30mm autocannon. So they need to somehow get in over here, and from here start to shoot down the lane and then possibly even advance to get better positions in order to shoot down towards the Russian positions down here. And they also need to somehow get into a position so that they can open fire along the street in order to deal with Ukrainian vehicles down here and the potential machine gun nests all along the street, in order to allow Russian infantry to cross the street itself. And also, if they set up shop along the buildings up here, they can obviously open fire on Ukrainian positions down here and suppressing machine guns and then engaging armored vehicles. Right, zooming in on the contested area. So here is where we have the extent of Russian-controlled territory. Here is the extent of Ukrainian-controlled territory, and in between is the contested area. And I'm guessing, and this is pure speculation, that Russia has managed to push out at least this far and maybe into these buildings here. And the reason is, I mean, if they are in control here and this is contested, then this seems logical that they are holding these buildings. But then they end up with open spaces here, and the street is open space as well. So Ukraine has a lot of angles where they can engage the Russians located in these buildings. So I don't think they have managed to cross this open space, and they probably have not been able to cross the streets this close to the Ukrainian positions. What they might have been able to do is get across here and into these buildings here, and then you have a point of contact here. Like I said, pure speculation, but it seems somewhat plausible. And then you have the building that I highlighted with the circle before. And as you can see from this position, you can, with a machine gun, put down a lot of fire on potential Russian positions in the buildings here. Likewise, if you have troops in these buildings, maybe a machine gun nest here, you can lock down Russian movement pretty substantially. And likewise, Ukrainian positions here and up here will be quite troublesome for any Russian trying to advance along the windbreak itself. God damn it, sorry for that. And taking a bit of a closer look at the contested area and where I think we have the most likely point of contact. Russia has more than likely secured these buildings and quite possibly even gotten across the street here and pushed into these buildings. And then we would have Ukrainians here and here. Now, why has Russia probably not moved on beyond this point? Well, this is the open area. This is the street, another open area for obvious reasons. And Ukraine has a lot of locations where they can simply open fire on the Russians as they try and cross. The Russians have to somehow suppress this entire area before they can make a dash over these open spaces. And that seems a bit unlikely. So I'm guessing that the Russians have fortified these positions, Ukrainians have fortified these positions, and they are exchanging fire over the street and over the field. However, over here, if, and this is a big if Russia has crossed into these buildings here, and we have Ukrainians over here, then I feel it's pretty likely that we have a massive point of contact in this compound, whatever it is. I can't even try and imagine what sort of building or whatever it is. I have no clue. But it's a compound of some sort, and this is where I think the major clash between Russian and Ukrainian infantry is taking place. The Russians will be having difficulty advancing. God damn it. The Russians will be having trouble advancing on the edge of these buildings because they will be taking fire from the south and southwest. Maybe returning fire with a couple of pot shots, but there's probably going to be a lot of AKs and machine guns aiming at them. So I'm fairly confident that the Russians will be, if they are advancing, it will be along this axis. Just if they're down here, they're setting up shop to counter-fire south, but the main push will be up here in order to enter the compound and then clear it out. And if it is a compound, it looks like it is a proper compound, so this is probably pretty well fortified by the Ukrainians. So yeah, this area here is more than likely the scene and location for some very heavy-duty close combat at point blank range. Lots of hand grenades and lots of full auto fire going on in and around this compound is my guess. So what is Russia's plan? What is the point of attacking Stepove? Well, like I pointed out in a previous video, they are trying to outflank Stepove from the north, from the south, in order to cut these two supply lines. And if they manage that, then the town itself will eventually fall and come under Russian control. And what happens at that point? Well, at that point, if Russia grabs Stepove, they are in a good position, obviously, to jump on over and attack Berdichi, possibly even from the north, like we saw at the beginning of this video. But they are also in a good position to follow this country road that I've highlighted with a white dotted line here, and follow that one south for about 2 kilometers, and then they will reach one of the 3 main supply routes leading into Avdiivka. In this case, the supply route leading into the coke plant. And well, if they get that far and secure that supply route, then they only have 1 kilometer left along the same country road, and if it's 1 kilometer to reach the main supply route leading into Avdiivka. And this is the most vital one, the one that is the most secure from Russian interference. And if they can cut this supply line, well, then there's only one left, and that is being threatened from the south by the Russians trying to push north. So yeah, if they manage to take Stepove, Russia has a couple of options, either going to Berdichi or pushing hard south in order to cut off Avdiivka from basically all reinforcements and supplies. And like we saw at the beginning of the video, Russia is more than likely also trying to push in order to cut off Berdichi from Ocheretune. And if they do that and cut this supply line, then Ukraine basically can't make use of the train station in Ocheretune, and they have to funnel in troops and reinforcements via other routes that will take longer, and that will consume more time and consume more fuel for Ukraine in order to get troops and resupplies to the front line. And that's it. Yeah, Ukraine has a big fight ahead of them. Hopefully they will turn this around and push the Russians back. But who knows? Russia is committed. They are throwing everything in the kitchen sink, quite literally, at the Ukrainians at the moment. So we'll see what happens. But until the next video, fix bayonet, go på marsch, and give them hell.